Alrighty, and to start off our presentations this evening, we will be starting with our planning workshop clients. And so our first group presenting today will be Emma, Turkey, Chris, and Henry with their client, the City of Tolleson.
I think so. All right. Hello, everyone. Can't say I've ever done a presentation with a microphone before, so this will be interesting. This is our project planning for an age-friendly Tolleson. I'm Emma. These are my colleagues, Chris, Turkey, and Henry. I'd also like to give a special shout out to both Allison, the program coordinator over at Project Cities, and Chris Hamilton, the city engineer at Tolleson, who's been working with us throughout this entire project. So our project is to help Tolleson plan for their increasing senior population by developing a aging and community action plan to help inform their next general plan. And I know it's a lot of jargon, so for the uninitiated, essentially a general plan is a document that a city creates for long-term goals, and aging and community is the concept of making a place somewhere that someone wants to live their entire life and can actually support them as they age and through all stages of their life. So a little background on the city itself. It's a smaller city of around 7,000 people, and it's actually landlocked between Avondale and Phoenix. And they used to be mainly agricultural focused, but nowadays the city has a lot more uses that are both more warehouse or industrial. And so why is this all important, and why the focus on senior population? Americans in general have been increasing in age, and the demographic of over 65-year-old Americans is projected to increase by almost 50% by the year 2050. And this is even more extreme in Tolleson itself, who saw their senior population nearly double in the last decade. And so this makes seniors not only a big part of Tolleson's population, but a massive part of their local community, which has been reiterated as an incredibly important part of both the city and their community.
So to inform our analysis and recommendations for the action plan, we drew on a variety of sources, but we pulled heavily from the World Health Organization's Guide to Age-Friendly Cities and a report from the American Planning Association, Planning Aging Supportive Communities. We chose these sources because they were comprehensive, detailed guidelines for aging and community, and because the World Health Organization maintains a network of cities that are following these guidelines. And through that network, we were able to find 2 peer communities that have roughly the same geographic limitations that Tolleson does. They were following the WHO guidelines pretty closely. However, they also added components that were specific to their local contexts. So for example, Belvedere, California here was more focused on involving seniors in their disaster planning and making sure that their specific needs were addressed during an emergency. And Hyattsville, Maryland was more focused on the social component, making sure that the social health of their seniors was good, and also publicizing city services. So after we handled our high-level research and took a closer look at what specific cities were doing, we moved on down to a super local context, and we did some community engagement with the people of Tolleson. And for that part, I'm going to pass that off to Turkey.
In order to understand the experience of seniors who live in Tolleson, we did a focus group with the seniors at the senior center. We divided into 2 groups, and each group about 15 participants. And we want to know and explore what works well in Tolleson for the seniors, and what challenges do they face, and what things can be improved in the near future. One thing they all agreed on and they love is the senior center. They love the staff, the food, everything provided, the activities, and they had also some concerns about the transportation and the affordable housing in the city, as well as the assisted living facility. There was a long waiting list they were concerned about, and many of them were not sure about the services that are provided by the city, like the Uber and Lyft service. When we asked them, some of them were not sure about it. We also did a community engagement during the Third Friday event in Tolleson back in March. And for this activity, we want to get more broader range of ages. We want to know from the community more about what they think about Tolleson. And we asked them two questions. First one, what they like about Tolleson. And the second one is what would make Tolleson a better place to age. I'll start with the second question. We got some concerns, like people had like some concerns about the safety and more housing options, and also city services like parks, public lighting. These were mentioned during the event. Lastly, people love the community in Tolleson. Community is a big thing for Tollesons, and we got over 30 responses on community, people, family, neighborhoods, and also people love the events and also culture, food. I'll pass it from here to Andy.
Okay, so we developed a series of recommendations based on the feedback that we heard and the best practices from our research. And we organized the recommendations based on these 6 areas from the Tolleson General Plan. So we developed a lot of recommendations. We don't have time to go through them all today, but I'll just try to highlight some of the more important ones. So for transportation, a couple of key themes we found were to improve walkability and to improve the public transit. For walkability, one specific thing for seniors was looking to improve ADA compliance across sidewalks to ensure that all sidewalks are accessible. And for public transit, things like paratransit and the Valley Metro Copper Card are things that can improve the access to public transit and the ability for seniors to travel on public transit. Housing was something we heard a lot of, especially in our focus groups. We heard that people wanted to live in assisted living facilities, but they were oftentimes unable to access them or unable to afford them. The waiting list we heard was a year long for the one assisted living facility in Tolleson. So we recommend looking to improve the quality of assisted living facilities and potentially bring new construction of assisted living facilities into the city. And we also heard from a lot of people who really love where they live and they love their homes, but they are concerned about, as they age, becoming inaccessible to them. So providing modification funds to improve the accessibility through things like chair lifts or shower modifications, things like that, and partnering with community organizations to do that. For our facilities, we heard a ton about people loving the facilities in Tolleson. They love all the services provided, but some people were unaware of all of them. So we recommend looking to improve the awareness through things like bulletin boards, calendars across the senior center. People also loved seniors love engaging with younger people. So looking at things like intergenerational classes and events and field trips. And finally, people did talk a lot about how they were unable to access some medical facilities. So looking to expand the Uber Lyft program to bring people farther into medical facilities across the valley and looking to bring new medical facilities into Tolleson. Our main environmental component was the pollution from warehouses. So looking to isolate those uses from senior centers and extreme heat. As we all know, Arizona deals with that. So looking to improve resilience to extreme heat. For our growth areas, one thing we heard a lot was looking to bring small businesses into the downtown area, especially in those unused areas downtown along Van Buren, and improving access to food through things like taking people with the Uber and Lyft program to grocery stores, bring grocery store delivery into Tolleson with a program similar to the Uber Lyft program, and looking to bring farmers markets and community gardens into the city. Finally, for open space and parks, the primary thing we heard was that people wanted to go to the parks, seniors love the parks, but they were unable to access them. So conducting a needs assessment to try to look at how to make parks more accessible and looking to get grants for those park improvements. So that concludes our presentation, and we now have 5 minutes for questions. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Friendly community as part of the total population. That's
So the question was, did we do anything to look into it becoming a dementia-friendly community? I would say that no, we didn't quite cover that. There are some general things covering like memory care inside of the WHO framework, but we didn't do anything super specific with that. That would be a good thing to continue investigating though.
Yeah, and in our feedback, we didn't hear anything from any of the community that specifically mentioned like dementia-friendly communities, but that's definitely something we can look into. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So what kind of, did you hear about any kind of park improvements they'd like to see, or?
The biggest thing was that it's kind of a difficult problem because most of what we heard was that when they went to from seniors was they were really hot at the parks, which is kind of a difficult problem to solve. So that was the main thing, was shade and things like that. And also it's difficult to get to the parks when like to walk to the parks for a lot of seniors. So transportation and shade were the main things that we heard.
And on top of that, I also think, if I remember correctly, during my section of the focus group, I think they also said that safety potentially was an issue. Maybe, I don't think there was a lot of like crime or anything going on, but the perceived safety and some of the things that they brought up was like lighting in the park, because a lot of the areas were dark. They didn't feel entirely safe going there when it was darker out. So yeah,
Lighting was mentioned a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We didn't look at assisted living and daycare. We did do an analysis of their downtown area, and there is a good amount of infill that can be done in the downtown area. There are some empty lots and things like that. And then we also looked at things like assisted or accessory dwelling units and things like that as a zoning change. I don't know. But yes, specifically around the downtown area, we heard that people wanted to see more things down there, and we also realized that there's a lot of empty space down there that we could be using. Thank you. Join them over there to take a quick photo. Allison as well. We will now be moving on to our next presentation, which is with the city of Kingman, with Sadia, Nasser, and Nicholas.
It's weird holding mic. That's true. Hi, everyone. I'm Sadia Amin, and we're presenting on our project, which was developing a playbook for the community arts in Kingman. This was done in collaboration with Project Cities and, of course, the city of Kingman. So what we're presenting are my colleagues, Nicholas and Naz. And in our presentation, we'll go over the project motivation, the planning process that we employed, and lastly, the playbook that we've created, which is also the recommendations that we provide the city of Kingman with. Route 66, we've all heard about it. It's a huge part of American history. And Kingman is a city that celebrates it fully. It established itself as the heart of historic Route 66 in 1993 when the resurgence of the main highway happened. The centennial of Route 66 is coming up next year in 2026. And the city of Kingman is hoping to celebrate it. And not only it in its past, but the present and the future of the city with its residents and tourists alike. So public art has always been a huge part of the city of Kingman, and its downtown is quite fascinating when it features a wide array of public art. The city, however, does lack a formal policy or program for its art that establishes art as a priority for the city or that brings its community together. So through our playbook, we are hoping to provide Kingman recommendations to do exactly that. Sorry. And in doing so, we have employed a couple of methodologies or processes, which includes taking public opinion from people who live or visit the city. And then we also studied some precedents from the US of cities and communities that have a very well-established arts program to learn what they're doing.
So we first conducted a survey in February that lasted through March in the city of Kingman, and we got over 400 responses. Questions included key demographics, like how long people have been living in the city, and public art preferences, how people think public art should be funded, and how would they like to be involved with the public arts process. These little slides that are an illustration of the data that we collected. As you can see here, there's strong support for art in downtown areas and public, high visibility areas along the roadway, highlighting high visibility for people. Also on this slide, what kind of art people would like to see more in Kingman. As you can see here, there's a large support for murals and indigenous art, as well as art that has a function and more nature-inspired art. We also conducted a survey that involved the public engagement event in Kingman on February 22nd to learn about the relationship the community has between the arts and the city. We conducted two activities. One was placing a dot map where we divided the city into 4 zones and asked participants to put a mark on where they would like to see more art. For the second activity, focus on the slides right here, we gave them prompts like Kingman is special to me because, and participants had to write the first word that came to their mind. These gave us insights into how and why people feel at home in Kingman. The survey showed strong support for murals, indigenous, and nature-themed art, particularly in downtown and at busy intersections. Based on this, we recommend focusing on art that reflects local history and Route 66, of course, experimenting with mediums and like trail art, and engaging the community and businesses to launch new projects. Securing funding will be key to bringing these ideas to life.
So for the case study, we looked at policies and practices of cities with established arts program across the United States. This process was completed in 3 phases. Phase 1, identifying these cities. Second phase was evaluating them. Third phase was do a deep dive research on some of these cities. So for the first phase, we studied 15 cities from across the United States. And this study was based on public art program with visible outcomes, their geographic and relevance to Kingman. And these 15 cities, as you see here, there are different in size, policy structure, and community involvement. So for the second phase evaluation, we evaluated these cities, all 15 cities, based on these 6 criteria. Also, it was ranked on a scale strong, medium, and weak. For example, if the city has strong community engagement where they engage local businesses, residents, and local artists, they will be strong. And if they just ask people for their opinion about what kind of art or so, it will be weak. These criteria are like the most important criteria for a successful art program. We did a deep dive study on 5 cities: Flagstaff, Albuquerque, Grand Junction, Peoria, and Asheville. All these cities have unique public art approach. They have 3 of these cities have 1% ordinance from their capital projects goes to public art, and these cities has some relevant to Kingman either through Route 66 or through their heritage and culture. So for best practices for Kingman, Kingman already have a lot of art in downtown and some other areas, but we think having updated art in downtown will keep people coming and will support local businesses. Second, Route 66 also should be one more celebrated with the desert landscape. Community engagement will be more common and involve artists from the community and support ongoing art, interactive art more because people love this kind of arts.
So looking at all these public opinions and our case studies, we have provided City of Kingman with a playbook, but because we're so short on time, I will just quickly go through. So we categorized our recommendations into 3 themes: policy, funding, and logistics. Policy-wise, we do recommend that the City of Kingman start doing what we are calling art master planning, so integrating public arts into their key city documents, such as their economic development strategic plan, which is currently being updated, or the general plan in the future. We were also looking at cities in Arizona that do zoning for the public arts, so to make it easier to expedite processes in terms of zoning. That the City of Kingman should have an art advisory board, which would look like a 7 to 9 member board that can take all the logistical responsibilities from the city. In terms of funding, which is always a difficult question, we do recommend that the City of Kingman have its percent for art program, which would look like keeping 1% of the development fee for art. A difficult bureaucratic decision, but it's a good one. And then the city does have some programs, like for its theater, where it has its Adopt a Seat program, where local businesses or residents can come and contribute funding for that. So similar programs can be looked towards for public arts. And lastly, in terms of logistics, we found that trails are what make it home for a lot of people. So enhancing that experience through art would be lovely. And lastly, maintenance through the art advisory board to see what art should be kept or what should be rolled over, or how to revamp the derelict but historical art, like its signpost, would be really good. That brings us to the end of our presentation, and we would like to thank Project Cities, especially Allison, I can see over here, sorry, and Josh Noble from the City of Kingman. And we'll take any questions.
About the kinds of organizations that are not, affiliated with the city that do arts-related work that could help support this vision. If you could talk a little bit about what that landscape is like in Kingman.
Yeah. I think in Kingman, it's not a really huge landscape, but in the US overall, like the National Endowment for the Arts does a lot of collaborations with cities. There's also an organization called American for the Arts that help with collaborating with the cities and then local organizations that can help you with public arts. So, I mean, the current funding scenario is a bit tricky, but in our recommendation in our report, we also look towards how to collaborate with external organizations that are embedded into public arts overall in the US, and then to how to look at arts from that angle.
Congratulations, great project. 400 surveys is a lot of surveys in such a short time. How did you do it?
Qualtrics and AI. Yeah, we had a Qualtrics that just summed up the data and all the responses for us. It was actually kind of
She's collecting.
all collecting.
Collecting.
We had it on social media,
We
right?
have social
Yeah.
media. There were also local news that would publish that the surveys in. There were a lot of Reddit posts that were made from the city of Kingman. So the collection part was also done by the city of Kingman. They were very active in doing that. Yeah, so it was a huge number. We were not expecting that. Thank you. Oh, we haven't, sorry.
Great presentation,
Thank you.
certainly appreciated it. It covered a lot of ground and something I'm sure is embraced in Kingman for sure. I have a couple questions on like the funding side on the 1%. I'm wondering if there was any, did you take the time or was there a need to look at what that funding would maybe equate to in terms of dollars? How that could be and what that amount would be and how to maybe apply it. My other question is, that was great on the 400 survey questions. Did you get a sense that people preferred more like murals or sculptures or different types of art? Was there a preference that way?
Yeah, so for the first question, we don't have the calculations, but we do know how much the city of Kingman currently spends on public art. I can tell you after the presentation. Okay, but we haven't done the mathematical calculations for that. For the survey, what was your question? Sorry.
Did people express?
Oh, yeah,
Sculptures versus other.
Yes.
Yeah, if we have a little time, we can go back. There's definitely a stronger support for murals. As you can see, we have a ranking and most people are very interested in seeing more murals. And obviously just trickles down to indigenous art and art that has a function and yada, yada. Light-based work was the least preferred one. Yes, the Halapai Indians, Halapai, excuse me, sorry, are very close nearby. No. One more.
We didn't do that, but it's a good idea. We can probably work on that. Do we have that? Okay.
I was just gonna say, I spoke to the economic development director from the Hualapai tribe last year at the planning conference. I did a session and they're interested in doing a pathway as part of their centennial celebration. So I spoke with some people from Kingman at the Roads and Streets conference, and I was excited to hear they want to do more like pathways and things like that. We're starting to see how pathways can serve as fire breaks also and provide improved access. But anyways, do you know if there's any pathways that go off Route 66 currently?
I don't know the answer. I'll get back to you. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Our next group is John, Ryan, Alejandro, and Audrey with their client, the City of Phoenix.
Hello, I'm John.
Hello, I'm Alejandro.
I'm Audrey.
I'm Ryan Correa, and this is our project. Thank you all for being here today.
Let's get started. So the title of, can you hear me now? So the title of the project comes from two significant investments coming to the South Central Phoenix area. One, the Valley Metro Light Rail South Central Extension, and number two, the Reimagined endeavor. Together, they promise the community economic benefits, sustainable transportation, and enhanced green spaces. However, there are legitimate concerns of of their potential negative implications, especially especially making the area too expensive for current residents to remain. To resolve this problem called displacement, our team of MUEP candidates partners with Phoenix's Planning and Development Department to identify solutions and policies against it. Next slide, please. For context, our study area is bounded by Interstate 17, Broadway Road, 7th Avenue, and 7th Street. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague Alejandro to explain the process.
Thank you, ma'am. So for our process, we had two main deliverables for this semester-long project. The first being an existing conditions report. And this is just some of those major takeaways from that report. So to start off, although this community has a history of underinvestment and the household median income is much lower than the Phoenix metro area, with our existing conditions report, we were able to conclude that there are diverse employment opportunities, which make the household median income rising at a quicker rate than the overall Phoenix metro area. And this area can also have potential to gain from transportation investments as well as planned beneficial investments in the community. And to finalize the existing conditions report, although this area has higher poverty and unemployment rates than Phoenix, again, those same economic factors and employment opportunities can help that in the future. But our main conclusion from the existing conditions report is that there are conditions for potential gentrification and that those conditions exist. But again, our second deliverable, our vision report, will dive into strategies, actions, and different policies to help prevent that. So for the first phase of our visioning report, we did a community engagement activity where we met with residents and visitors to the area. We attended the El Rio Vivo Festival at Liberty Wildlife, where we collected responses to 3 questions around the topics of what would you like to keep or change in your neighborhood, as well as asking for responses on what residents or visitors might think of when they hear the name Rio Phoenix. And I would love to talk more about it, but I know we have a short amount of time. But we took those responses and coded a word cloud, and most of the responses were on the categories of connection to wildlife, shade, and as well as pedestrian accessibility. For the second phase of our vision report, my colleague Ryan Correa conducted 3 expert interviews. The first one with the Unity Council in Fruitvale, Oakland, California. This one was to learn more about social equity and to learn about a successful project that happened at the Fruitvale neighborhood in Oakland. The second was with the River Network to learn more about the equitable development toolkit that they have developed, and as well as learning more about their mission of connecting people to rivers and connecting people to rivers and their water sources around them. And the third and final expert interview was with the Pima County Community Land Trust to learn more about land trust and how strategies in land trust can help prevent gentrification and displacement. And for the third part of our vision report, we analyzed 3 different cities from across the country. Our first case study was the Pilsen neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois. We chose Pilsen in Chicago to learn more about a development that might have not had as much community engagement as you would like to have in an equitable development. The second, Taylor Yard in Los Angeles, California. We chose this one to learn more about how the community can be included in the planning process, but then it might fall off during the implementation phases towards the end of the development. And the third and final one is Caño Martín Peña in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where this is the essence of a fully community-led development. And now I'll pass it over to Audrey and Ryan for the recommendations from our reports.
We collected all of, sorry, try one more time. Little nervous, okay. We combined all the insight that we got from the case studies, the interviews, and the community into a set of recommendations for the city of Phoenix, so that Central Rio can take advantage of these investments, without, while preventing displacement. So the big takeaways were especially what we learned from the Chicago case study is that efforts to prevent displacement need to start early and preferably before the market has a chance to react to these investments. They also, every interview told us that we need to find a backbone community that can have the best capacity in order to implement these strategies. And we also need to remember that affordability isn't just prices, it's also costs. It's costs and incomes, sorry. And then finally, that meaningful community engagement is really crucial, and like in San Juan, the community needs to lead the way. And then in the report, we presented our recommendations in a implementation table that gave a time frame and who should do what, which will help the City of Phoenix to take this plan into action. So the City of Phoenix should expand their existing engagement programs by making sure that they pay back the community for their efforts, just like the Unity Council does. They should create a permanent community advisory board for this unique area, and they should make sure that implementation progress is transparent. To avoid the worst of green gentrification, they should make sure that parks are designed with the community needs being prioritized. And like we can learn from what we learned from the El Rio Vivo event to find out what those community needs are. And to ensure that current residents can take advantage of these light rail investments, the city should work to lower the cost of transit, and they should use the tools at their disposal to make sure that the areas around stops are more walkable and bikeable. And finally, to prevent the displacement of small local businesses, the city should engage in community benefit agreements with new developments, and also use organizations like the Unity Council as a template for expanding small business support.
Great. Thank you, Audrey. Okay. So as we think about the broader impacts of green gentrification, green investment, and these great transit investments that are happening in the city, one issue that comes to the top of everyone's mind is housing. So next, we're going to discuss specific housing strategies we identified in our report that aim to attack this issue head on. So there's several housing recommendations. We only have time to talk about a few today. They're organized into a few key concepts. The first key concept is keeping people in their homes. So strategies we identified for this include expanding legal aid for tenants to prevent unjust evictions, and also implementing right to return policies for the displaced residents who might be displaced by redevelopment for the time, but give them that access to return once that development is in place. These are proven tools to prevent displacement. And the second is creating lasting housing affordability. So by building and working with community land trusts and implementing alternative housing models, we can create lasting affordability that will allow the current community to stay in place while all of these great investments are happening. Lastly, in this section, it's important to protect the culture and identity of Central Rio. So focusing on what makes Central Rio unique, which is its culture, history, and people. So by tracking gentrification risk continually and strengthening historic preservation measures, we can ensure that revitalization of this area doesn't come at the cost of community identity, and we can take responsibility for the potential impacts of development in this area. Okay, so as we know that policy is only part of the equation, what really makes it happen is the people and partnerships surrounding it. So we have 3 sections of themes to make this happen. The first is centering community leadership. We don't just want to plan for the community, we want to plan with them, which the City of Phoenix already does a great job with this by engaging the community. We'd like to expand on that further. So by assessing local interest and capacity, we can ensure residents are leading development, not just responding to it. Second is building strong local partnerships. There are already organizations in the area doing this work, such as the South Central Development Corporation. Its implementation is going to be most effective when it's building on existing leadership and focusing on relationships. And I'm running out of time, so. Okay. There's a really nice report coming soon that we'll be happy to share. Lastly, I'd just like to say we need to stay grounded and adaptive. As things continue to change in Central Rio, so should the approach. So it's important to continue to learn from the community, continue to learn from what other cities are doing, and keep it going. Okay. All right. So before we close, I'd just like to take a moment to thank the City of Phoenix Planning and Development Department, the Rio Reimagined team for all your commitment and time working with us, and also Matt and Megan for your commitment to our project. We're really proud of everything that we've been able to do together, so thank you for your time.
Really great presentation, like South Central is really beautiful, and what's happening has been really great. I'm just curious if you all have considered kind of the other side of it, perhaps more so for the business owners and maybe the few of the homeowners there, what their opportunities may look like as the area starts to go through redevelopment, such as if they get buyouts or anything, and how do you preserve the neighborhood while also giving those business owners, property owners, the opportunity to capitalize on.
I'm aware that we were working on it. At the beginning at the initial phases of the project, we consider reaching out to homeowners and businesses. However, we ultimately dropped that because we determined that some of the business owners, some of them might be experiencing outreach fatigue from all the public outreach, like with the Valley Metro, South Central Light Rail Extension. Hope that answer your question, Jonathan.
And just to add something to that, we did look specifically at like right to return policies for that would be more for like renters, maybe also extend that to business renters as well. And looking at making sure that community benefit agreements would like include allowing local businesses to like utilize these new developments that would come in too.
Yeah. And just one more thing, we did in our initial report, look at the East Lake neighborhood where some really powerful like programs to keep those businesses strong while development was happening went on. So yeah, so in the report, there's, thank you. Thank you for your question.
One more question. I was curious if their employers.
Sorry, so curious about which high paying jobs would be residents? Sure.
Unfortunately, we don't have an answer for that at this time, but we can get back to you.
Okay. That's fine.
Our next presentation is Sanam, Shayesta, Shraddha, and Gio presenting with Rio Reimagined. Yeah, that's
You can start.
All right, so our project is the Rio Reimagined Rivershed Asset Mapping. My name's Gio, and I'm here with Sonam, Shraddha, and Shayesta. So a little bit about our project. Our project is working with the Rio Reimagined initiative, which is an initiative that wants to have more regional planning between municipalities to have an overall like cohesive vision for the Salt and Gila River corridors. And our project aligns with this as we are trying to identify assets and opportunities for development along the corridor while also identifying constraints where we should respect the corridor. So this is a little bit about our study area. So it stretches from Buckeye in the west to Mesa in the east. And in between, we have the cities of Goodyear, Avondale, Phoenix, and Tempe. In addition to these cities, we also have 2 tribal nations and Maricopa County as our partners. And also, a little bit about also, we have a 2-mile buffer outside of the river corridors, and this helps to expand our study area to include many just assets that may influence the corridor while not actually being within the river itself. So a little bit about our methodology. So before we ended up doing stakeholder interviews later in the process, we had to identify initially what we thought assets were for the river. So we came up with a list. We looked for data online and also requested data from MAG and Maricopa County to have more regional-wide data sets. And then after we received the data, we had to manage the data somehow. So we had to create a data management system to be organized and yeah. And then we conducted stakeholder interviews. And this was important for seeing what these communities valued as assets and to kind of add more assets that we didn't consider ourselves to be mapped later on. And also, Shraddha will talk about case studies that we did for this to kind of inform more about the process. And also Sonam will talk about social media strategies that were used or that we recommend. So a little bit about existing conditions. So this is a population density map of the corridor by census block group. And you see that in Phoenix, Tempe, and Mesa, you have higher population densities. This is more due to, at least in Phoenix and Tempe, the cores of those cities being like right within the corridor or right outside of it, and also in Mesa as well. And this aligns with higher like employment centers being in these areas as well. And one thing you can see is that the West Valley along the corridor is a little bit less, quite a bit less less developed. So there are opportunities to add on to the vision of this. And this is also the racial composition of the corridor. So as you can see, actually more than half of the population along the corridor is minority. And something else to note is that around 40% of the corridor's population is Hispanic Latino. And some existing infrastructure that to note along the corridor. So we have multiple major freeways, so I-10, the Loop 202 and 303. In the future, there will be SR30 in the west and also SR85. Tempe Town Lake is obviously something huge to acknowledge. Its purpose for recreation as well as flood control and stormwater. And also there are multiple parks along the corridor, and SRP also manages water and power along the corridor.
For the case studies, we have taken 3 major urban rivers in the US that has been revitalized. These rivers were selected because they have successfully transformed the degraded urban waterways into vibrant recreational, ecological, and economic assets. And also, the study area is also similar to Rio Reimagined project. So the first one is LA River, and the study area is 51 miles. And the major feature of this river is like it has concrete channel for flood control. It has restored natural habitat, and it also includes parks and greenways. So the strength of the LA River is like it has all the comprehensive vision. It has restored ecological revitalization, inclusive and sustainable water management. And the challenges are safety issues due to crimes and low lights along the corridor, and limited public transit and lack of clear signs along the trails. So the second case study is San Antonio River Walk. The study area is 15 miles, and it is one of the most beautiful river walk and a hub for tourists. It has successfully blended history, cultural, and economic development. And the strength of this river is like enhanced quality of life, connectivity, aesthetic enhancement, and the challenges include flood control maintenance, environmental concerns, and historical preservation, and also overcrowding. So the third one is White River, and the study area is around 58 miles. It is also one of the biggest river in Indiana. And the White River Vision Plan aims to enhance, improve water quality, increase recreational and foster equity. And also the opportunities include economic growth with the tourism and stronger community pride, and challenges include flooding, pollution, habitat degradation, and limited public access and erosion. So the key takeaways from all these case studies are prioritizing ecological restoration for healthier ecosystem, planning for social equity early in order to prevent displacement and gentrification, committing to a long-term vision and using phased implementation for quick wins and success early on, prioritizing deep community engagement and celebrating cultural and historical identity, and acknowledging indigenous communities, environmental history, and in order to deepen the connection between river and the people.
So one of the most crucial and engaging aspect of this project was conducting the key stakeholder interviews. So we interviewed representatives from 6 cities and Maricopa County using a set of 11 carefully prepared questions covering topics from cultural and historical significance to the accessibility challenge in the river corridor. So each stakeholder provided valuable and insightful information that actually enriched our information about the region and what assets are present in it. So one of the questions we asked the key stakeholders was how do they define an asset? And we received some really interesting responses. Some said an asset is something which is installed, holds value, and has a lifespan, while others said the environmental aspect in the river corridor itself is the biggest asset. So drawing from these responses and some additional research, we came up with a definition of an asset, saying an asset refers to any existing resource, infrastructure, or feature that adds value to a place and significantly contributes to the social, economic, environmental, or cultural well-being of the communities. So we mapped assets all along the 55-mile river of the corridor, and we classified them under this broad 6 categories, which are administrative and land use, environmental and natural features, cultural and community, transportation and infrastructure, economic and commercial, and future asset. Due to the time limit, we'll just show you what we mapped under 2 of these broad categories. So the environmental and the natural feature, which was one of the most important and flagged out during the key stakeholder interviews or from the case studies and all. So under this, we have mapped trails, parks, and open spaces all along the river corridor. With this, we also have the washes, canals, and wells in the river corridor and the location of the wells, And we also have shown the flood zone in the river corridor along with some of the existing mitigation infrastructure here. So next group is the culture and the community, in which we have mapped multiple public and government facilities ranging from airport all the way to washrooms in the river corridor. And we have also mapped schools, showing it into different categories. And from the key stakeholders, we highlighted some of the historic sites in the river corridor. I know this can be a little bit overwhelming to see all these assets in a static map, but don't worry, we got you covered with our story map.
Thank you, Sonam. For this project, we have also created a story map. A story map is an online interactive tool. In this case, our story map shows all the assets we have mapped along the Salt and Gila River corridor in a way that easy to explore and understand. This tool is not only for planners or GIS experts; it is made for everyone. So, and here is the QR code. You can scan and explore the full story map to see the corridor from the geographic perspective. So now to address the data gaps and support better planning across the river corridor, we identified few key recommendations. First, we recommended in improving GIS data management. Currently, cities and agencies handle data in a different ways. Establishing consistent system would make it easier to keep information up to date, compare across jurisdiction, and share resources more effectively. Second, we suggest creating shared regional asset platform via maps. Updates and planning tools can be restored. This would improve collaboration among cities, tribal nations. And then, in addition, we also recommend to reconnect fragmented trails.
Well, to enhance the Rio Asset Map as a future community engagement platform, we recommend on leveraging some of the social media tools to boost the accessibility, interactivity, and participation. So first, we recommend using something which Maricopa County has already done, that is an interactive idea wall, where residents can actually post suggestions, photos, and videos about the river corridor. Second, and the most important, is using some interactive mapping tools like map.social and public coordinate by Kim Lee Hon. These tools allow the users to actually pinpoint to the location, share concerns, and give location-specific feedback. So these will make our asset map not just accurate, but more community-driven as well. And plus, these tools are super compatible with ArcGIS, so we can actually build on what we already have. Then definitely a dedicated social media channel in platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And last but not the least, community storytelling, like especially the indigenous and historical narratives. So together, these tools can actually make the Rio asset map not just a product, but a platform for ongoing dialogue and collaboration.
All right, so ultimately, this is just a semester's worth of work, but we do feel like we found a lot of assets. However, we do believe that there's still many assets that we may not have captured, and we believe that this will help inform future planning for the Rio Reimagined initiative, and hopefully future phases of the plan are informed by this. And this also, we didn't put this up for long earlier, but if you wanted to access our story map, this is the QR code for it. And that's our presentation. Oh, also, I wanted to say a special thank you to Maggie and Cecilia of the University City Exchange in the back. Yeah. And also a special thank you to Matt and Megan for helping us out through the project. Any questions? Me here?
From the case studies that you guys saw, and then do you have any key takeaways regarding GIS and data management practices that they have implemented that would be beneficial for the Rio Reimagined?
Really interesting question, and that's what we were expecting also. We actually look into like a very specific case studies where we actually wanted to see like before this like the implementation phase was done, where they have collected the data and all. But sadly, there wasn't any documentation on how they collected or how they arranged. It was just like, oh, these are the key assets in this corridor and how these actually benefited into having like to build a plan for the river or something like that. But we had Drew in our, Drew really helped us to actually sort out how to do the data management part and all.
I forgot to say a special thank you to Drew also. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Any other questions?
Maybe some of the gaps of data that you discovered, and maybe where they should focus in the future on that.
All right, so I'll give a few examples. So the city of Tempe had its own tree inventory, and it was very, it probably maybe exists for other cities as well, but we're not able to easily access that data for other cities. So that was one of the gaps we identified as something to fill in the future. In addition, some of the gaps that we had were like economic incentive zones that we weren't able to access for all the cities. So that could also be something, again, that may be stuff we couldn't find, but those are gaps that we identified for the purpose of this report. Yeah.
Just gonna say, the number one thing that people wanted in the Maricopa County Parks Plan to improve the visitor experience was quality interactive maps, quality online maps. And then number two is improving access for low-income and underserved groups. Number three was ADA access. So anyways, but I think the interactive mapping component is really a big thing there. I know that Maricopa County helps with their GIS firm and helps the Lower Gila River Collaborative, but who would help? Who do you guys think would be best at helping to manage that like trail mapping effort across the cities?
It's a good question. I mean, we did get trail data from the Maricopa Association of Governments. So, I mean, knowing that that's like a regional like planning agency, I feel like that's the first that comes to mind. But I don't know if you guys have any.
Obviously, really don't know like on the managing part, but what we noticed was like Maricopa County had like a data set on trails, and we got some from MAC as well. But then what we noticed was like the fields inside those trail data were like very different, which makes it really hard to integrate these two data, even though it was like the same like data on trails and all. So that was one of our recommendation to have like a proper structure for each of these assets so that it's uniform throughout like agencies or like maybe country as well. Like if you're collecting a trail data, these fields has to be there. So like it's more interactive and
Great information.
Will your report live in the real Reimagined website?
Yes.
Yes, yes, it will.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Our second half of the evening will cover our applied projects. Our first one starting off with Walter with his presentation from Valley Metro.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Walter Gay. For the last year, I've been a service planning and GIS intern at Valley Metro, and I'm presenting my project that I did with them, Transit to Trails, with the help of my committee, Dr. Lindsay Oloyede, Professor Dale Larson, and Aaron Xavier. So as a brief overview of my project, what I'm going to talk about today, the Phoenix Mountain Parks represent a major public asset here in the Valley. They get millions of visitors a year, and often those visitors are heavily clustered both geographically and temporally, leading to really overburdening of their existing parking system. This is exacerbated by the fact that Valley Metro's current fixed route transit service does not provide very good options to get to these spaces via transit networks. We have a number of peer cities throughout the American West who have developed programs to get their transit users out to these kind of spaces. And based on the best practices that these cities have developed, I am recommending a pilot program of 2 seasonal, weekend, and holiday-only express bus routes that would serve popular trailheads in the Phoenix Mountain Park system. So as a really brief overview of the literature on this subject, there is a little bit of research done on transit to parks initiatives, which finds that most successful programs focus on relieving parking congestion at these sites and providing sustainable access, but often run into issues with limited funding for these routes and driver availability for these kind of recreational routes. There is an important distinction here between the Phoenix Mountain Parks and parks in general, in that the Phoenix Mountain Parks are a regional parks network as opposed to a local or a neighborhood park. So that means they have slightly different use cases where people are there for more outdoor recreation or for rather than like picnicking or community engagement. And they also have a much wider visitor catchment area, often the whole region or even tourists coming in from out of town, which obviously affects the transit infrastructure network of this. So the Phoenix Mountain Parks, like I said, are a regional parks network owned and operated by the City of Phoenix Parks and Rec Department. They primarily serve hikers, although also a few mountain bikers and equestrians. In 2023, they got nearly 3 million unique visitors. And these visitors are really clustered both in terms of when they're arriving and also where they're arriving. So on this map here, I have 3 of the most popular parks highlighted with some of the most popular trailheads at these sites. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see Pima Canyon Trailhead. This site alone accounts for around 13–14% of all these 3 million visitors a year. Echo Canyon Trailhead in the top right accounts for around 7 or 8%. And as you can see, they only really have the one major trail there. So they're having a lot of people all going that one trailhead to go to one trail. And then as you'd expect, they're also really clustered in terms of when they're arriving to the sites. They're arriving mostly during the winter. Parks Department data shows a peak between November 1st and March 31st, and then also during the weekends and holidays. This creates a lot of issues for the on-site parking at these trailheads. I've highlighted 4 that were brought to my attention by the Phoenix Parks Department here. One I really wanted to mention here is the Echo Canyon at Camelback Trailhead. On an average Saturday or Sunday during the weekend, they're getting more than 1,100 visitors at that site compared to 128 on-site parking spots. That trailhead is supposed to open at 7 a.m. at sunrise during the winter. Unofficially, though, the rangers at that site open the gate closer to 4:30 in the morning, and then it's actually closed by usually 6:30 or 7 as it's at capacity. And then they have to have rangers or in the winter even police officers that are monitoring that situation basically until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Another one that stands out here is the 24th Street lot. That one does have available neighborhood parking, so it's not quite as dire as that number suggests, but all these are really over capacity for their parking lots. And really, part of the issue is that parking is really the only way to get there right now because our existing transit infrastructure isn't designed to get people to these spaces. Back in December, I took our existing fixed bus routes to all these trailheads, and it was a challenge. So coming from urban core you're typically making at least one transfer to get out to these sites. The buses on the edge here are usually 30 to 30-minute headways, so you're often waiting a long time at bus stops. And then once you're at the nearest stop, you're not really at the trailhead. You're making a walk, usually about 15 to 20 minutes along roads like these ones here, where often there's not a sidewalk. So if you're traveling with your family to a trailhead, it's probably not a viable option right now to take our transit infrastructure. So to look for solutions to this, I conducted a series of 4 interviews with planners from some of our peer transit agencies throughout the United States. I transcribed these interviews and then did some qualitative coding on them using the code book up here. And then getting into the results of those interviews, I broke it down into 2 major categories. First category is our peer agencies who use local bus service to get people out to their hiking trailheads. So those are going to be RTD in Denver and TransLink in Vancouver. And so RTD actually uses a system pretty similar to ours, where it's just year-round local service, with the difference being that they have stops much closer to a couple of their popular trailheads. And what they find is that this is not super effective in getting people out to the trailheads. They're still seeing those kind of long wait times for buses, multiple transfers to get out there. They don't see a lot of high ridership at these stops. TransLink in Vancouver, they run a really robust system of seasonal local route extensions, so you can get out to just about any hiking trailhead, picnic area, beach, whatever during the summer. And because of the comprehensive nature of this, people feel comfortable taking the bus because they feel like they can get just about anywhere they want to get to in terms of recreation destinations. The second set of cities I interviewed use express service instead of local service. This is going to be services that just pick people up at an origin point and go directly to that trailhead and then back. And these 2 transit agencies were Marin Transit in the North Bay area and King County Metro in Seattle. So both these programs have been running for many years. They started out as pilot programs and sort of iterated over the years. Marin Transit has been running the Muirwood Shuttle since 2005. That is a shuttle that goes from a park and ride in downtown Larkspur, a town north of San Francisco, to the Muir Woods National Monument and then back, running as frequently as every 10 minutes. This is really focused on directly capturing drivers who would otherwise be turned away from an at-capacity parking lot. King County Metro in Seattle, they have tried a couple different things. They tried something similar to this, where they're really focusing on capturing drivers, and they found that they actually have more success in their city with a program that focuses about half on capturing drivers and then also half on connecting to the existing transit network. So people who are reliant on the bus or their rail system can actually get out to these more far-flung places. Because of this, they're running longer routes, and they're also running them at lower frequencies because they're more connected with that general transit system. So based on these practices, I am recommending a set of 2 routes. Here's the first one. This one is based on the Marin Transit model, where it's going to be focusing on directly capturing drivers who would, again, otherwise be turned away from an at-capacity lot, calling it the Echo Miller route, running from Miller Plaza to Echo Canyon. Miller Plaza is the closest available park and ride to Echo Canyon. This would run from our Valley Metro's October service change through our April service change, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays only from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It would be 15-minute headway, so you'd be really not very long waits at all for the bus. It'd be 18 minutes travel, and then it would cost about $96,000 a year, according to our projections. This would run through the city of Scottsdale, who have traditionally not been the most friendly towards new transit improvements. However, there are 2 reasons we have to believe that this might not be the case with this route. So one thing that came up with both my interviews with Marin Transit and King County was that these routes can actually be good for economic development, as they're often ridden by tourists of the city. And then also with Prop 479, there is seed funding available for new routes, which this would qualify for. So Scottsdale would not be on the hook for nearly as much as they would otherwise be. My second route recommendation is based on the King County Metro model of connecting both to a park and ride and also to existing transit networks, calling the Pima Apache route, running from the Apache and Dorsey Park and Ride in downtown Tempe to Pima Canyon at South Mountain. This would again connect to a park and ride, but also our light rail, Route 81, lots of pedestrians who live in the Tempe area. Again, it would run only from our October service change to our April service change, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It would be a longer headway, 30 minutes at 35-minute travel time, and costs $104,000 a year. This one would only run through the cities of Tempe and Phoenix, so it would be probably a little bit more politically feasible to fund this in traditional means, but would also be eligible for that Prop 479 seed funding. So again, these would be a pilot route suggestion that would probably be iterated over time, as they did in Marin and King County, with the goal of eventually spreading to the other 2 sites I mentioned, and possibly even to other cities in the valley. And with that, I will take questions.
So So Camelback, what I heard at a meeting was that we almost lost public access to Camelback, and that's why there's only 2 small spots available. And that's crazy that how difficult it is for people, especially visitors coming, maybe not being as aware how busy it gets. So, I mean, it still seems like a kind of a long drive time to have to, you know, I mean, I wanted, my question, like, could we look at opportunities like Arizona Mills? You know, so I was up in Sedona recently and there's a school there. They do the bus shuttles are required at some of the trailheads on the weekends. So Sedona is a great example for us to look at in the state. With OHVs and other impacts that they've had, but like, what are your thoughts that maybe, you know, could we find closer areas?
Yeah, so the question is if we could find any closer park and rides or areas for pickup. For the Echo Canyon, I did look at, there's Arcadia High School a little way south of there. But my understanding is that they're already pretty busy on the weekends. I've heard that they have a lot of events and sports and whatnot. They don't really have space for that, but it would be good to look for closer places. Drew?
It's like traffic. I mean, we're parking much more.
I didn't count it, but so I went out in early April on a Saturday morning. The Miller Plaza is it's like a shopping mall area, and they had dozens, if not 100 parking spots sitting open there. And then on that same day, I drove right over to Echo Canyon and was turned away. So yeah.
Appreciate it.
Was any analysis of the capacity of the park trails, because there's a lot of erosion and tear that, in a way, the parking limitation actually helps with the environmental impacts.
Yeah.
And having hiked all of those trails, totally experiencing what you're explaining there. I like the idea of looking for maybe closer places, because I know I've parked at like a church and walked a mile to get to a trailhead. But I didn't know if this model with the bus system would also accommodate bikes, because on South Mountain Trails, a lot of the traffic is they're driving with their mountain bikes.
Yeah, so for the bikes, this would use buses that do have the bike rack on the front. It would only accommodate a couple bikes, and I think it would primarily be for hikers, but that would be possible. And then as far as if the trails could support it, I spoke with a representative who works at Echo Canyon, and his opinion was essentially that we're already messing it up about as much as it's going to be messed up, so that a few more additional people a day is not going to be a huge burden on it. Yeah, so at least in the King County model and the Marin model, they're charged a standard bus fare. So I think that would be the same here. And then typically the lots are clearing up around 3 p.m., at which point you can park pretty easily. For the route going to Pima Canyon, that's also focused on kind of adding accessibility for transit users. It might be worthwhile to run a little bit later, but for Echo Canyon, I think it's primarily going to be emptying out around 3. So yeah.
What would be the bus assignment? You can say the size of the buses that you would have.
Yeah, so the idea would be to use some of the buses that are currently local circulators. So in Tempe, that'd be the Orbits, and Scottsdale, that'd be the trolleys. The Tempe Orbits run a couple school tripper routes, so they do have availability on the weekends. And then the Scottsdale trolleys, I think, also have more availability on the weekends. Yeah, so I might actually... Yeah, so I have the lot configurations here. They're designed to get emergency vehicles in and out, and so a 30-foot bus could get in there and get out. Screen.
Parking pricing at all? Like, what about charging for parking during peak time to help pay for some of this service?
That would be an interesting idea, but that would be the Parks Department responsibility.
Charging full fare to ride transit and it's free to park, you're not going to get people to ride transit. They're still going to show up and drive around looking for a place to park. So you should at least charge.
Councilman tried that.
We actually did try that and it was hell. There were 90% people were against. Very, very policymakers that were willing to support any kind of fee related.
Right here, and then we'll go to.
Just a very short, but why do you not add multiple trailheads? So in case of Camelback, why didn't you like Choya?
So my initial route was to do Choya Trail as well, to do both Choya and Echo Canyon. There would be issues with stopping a bus on, is that Invergordon or Tatum? There's not really a spot for it. And then also you'd be running almost half the route or more through the town of Paradise Valley, which I think would lead to more resistance.
Excellent. And then if we can have Walter's committee members and Valley Metro, we're at the picture station. Our next presentation is with Nikita, also with a presentation from Valley Metro.
Hi, my name is Nikita Ankit Kumar Soni, and today I'm going to present my applied project with Valley Metro. Every Ride Matters addressing, Every Ride Matters addressing ASU students' public transit needs in Tempe. This research was conducted in collaboration with Valley Metro under the supervision of Aaron Xavier and with the academic support of Dr. Megan and Dr. Lindsay. So let me start sharing some voices, real voices from ASU students. The bus didn't stop again. Is this even coming? The app and the sign doesn't match. You know, the students over here from ASU definitely relate, this quotes. And I lived these moments too. And missing class, running late to pick up my daughter, standing in 100-degree heat with no idea when the next bus would come. But here is the important part. These stories don't reflect a lack of graduated. Students value and depends on Valley Metro. But they just saying that we believe in system. We just want to, it work it better. Let me give you a kind of a background of the student population in USA. That, in USA, there are like a high student population in college towns. And Tempe is, one of them. So the students who are in college town, they generally most depend on this public transportations. And institutions also, supporting to students to use the public transit. But what I did in literature review, there is a major gap that, students are not considered while taking any decision in the college town. So, and again, the importance of transportation in student life is like, have a great impact. They definitely help them for the academic success. And another study also show that, the Gen Z trend is shifting to the public transit. Talking about the Tempe, everyone knows that, Tempe and Valley Metro is having a great public transit. They have like Valley Metro buses, Valley Metro rail, Tempe orbits, and Tempe streetcar, which is giving, a sustainable mode of transportation to the students and the citizens of Tempe. Yeah. Talking about the overall observations with the Tempe, sorry, I didn't mention that I'm just focusing on the bus transit because Tempe is having, lots of mode of transportation, but I am just focusing on the bus transit. So look at the trend that, Tempe is on the move, that it's, I just got the ridership from the 10 best cities, and Tempe is rapidly increasing the ridership, especially with the buses. And yeah, you can see in this, rail ridership data that I compare with the rail ridership, streetcar and the bus. Bus is all-time favorite in Tempe. Again, ASU. Everyone knows about it. ASU. Arizona is all about ASU, and ASU is having like what I feel. So sorry for that. But yeah, we have like, more than 52,000 students in ASU. So yeah, and most of the students are depending on the transit. And the great news is we have like a parking charges over here, which is like $800 per semester, which is like too much. So students generally prefer, you know, public transit over here. Yeah, so if you see the, you know, enrollment data for the ASU, it's increasing day by day. So that means we have like more students and we need more demand for the public transit. Yeah, so from that and from my experience, I just got the research questions that what are the key services gaps and accessibility challenges that ASU students encounter when using the bus services for their commutes? How do students' experience with bus reliability, accessibility, and comfort influence their mode of choice and transit satisfaction at ASU Tempe campus? What strategies can be implemented to improve bus services effectiveness and better align public transportation with the needs of a university student in Tempe? This is my methodology. So I did survey of students where I asked them questions about their demographic profile, their issue and services with the, you know, and which kind of bus routes they are following, because there are two type of bus are running in Tempe. One is the circulators that are orbit service, they are free, and the number buses by Valley Metro, they are like chargeable. And I'm very happy that I got like 227 surveys from the students in the time period of 1 month. So this is some findings from my survey that generally students commonly use the bus on a daily manner. But you know, the students who are not using the bus, they are like having the problems with the safety and, you know, more depend on the private transportations or flexible options, and the bus routes are inconvenient. So, you know, the students who are not using the buses, they also complaining that, you know, they have the problems with the buses. Talking about their satisfaction, so yeah, most of the students are satisfied, but still they have like, you know, have issue and challenges with the bus transit in Tempe. And talking about which kind of bus they are using, so Orbit is, you know, like famous buses the students are using, and the number bus and the last is like both generally students are using. So we asked students about the issue with the students who are using the Orbit buses and issue with them, and the students who are using the number buses and issue with them. So yeah, talking about the Orbit buses, Mars and Mercury is the all-time famous routes. And also in our survey that, you know, we also asked the location of the students' housing. So we locate the in the map that, you know, where the student population is living. So Mars and Mercury is all-time the famous, and generally Jupiter, Venus, Earth, and Flash, they are not like they have a low ridership data, and the lowest used by the students are the Saturn. So talking about all the issue and challenges they are having, so most of the problems they are having with the Mars and Mercury, that is overcrowding and long waiting times, and buses are not on the time. The students who are using the number bus, so most famous routes are 30, 72, and 60, but still, you know, they have the problems with the number buses also, which is like a long waiting time, and most important, you know, they are not on the time like on the app, and, you know, the actual coming time is like very different for that. Yeah. Again, in my survey, I also ask students that, you know, when they come to ASU, do they have like awareness about the public transit in Tempe? But most of the students say that no, they don't have. And they also know from the friends and, you know, word of mouth from the students they are studying with them. And yeah, from all the survey findings, you know, these are the major gap that I find that, you know, we need to do these things. And from these gaps, I implement a like number of recommendations. I'm focusing on the Mars and Mercury, which is like very famous and among the students, and they have the problems with that. So we have like a short, so the purple one is the existing route for the Mars. So I locate the housing population of the students from the survey only and suggested a short trip, which is having, you know, very short time to reach the ASU campus. And it's also having, you know, the short distance to reach the ASU campus. Again, with the Mercury, if you see the violet thing, That's the existing route. So again, University Drive is having a like more students population over there. So I suggest a short route from the University to drive to the directly ASU campus. The next recommendation that, generally students don't know what is Valley Metro about when they come to ASU. So at the time of orientation, Valley Metro staff should be there, and they give them information about what kind of routes they can use, and the U-Pass facility, like Valley Metro and ASU providing it. Yeah, and I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit nervous, but yeah, thank you for this thing. And yeah, before ending this presentation, I really thank to each and every Valley Metro staff, Aaron, Rachel, Jeff, and Walter who come, and Christopher who come and, for my presentation, and especially Megan and Matt, so always supporting me, and all the students who participate in my survey. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And yeah, I'm open for the questions. Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, so Orbit is generally free, but that's a U-Pass, student can use for the number buses. Yeah. No, it costs like $150 for the semester. But the thing is that, students can't use those pass in the summer break. It's for the only semester only. So they have to pay, when they are using for the breaks. They have to pay for that. Sorry, that's a great question, but yeah.
They still chose transit.
Yeah, but in my survey, I find that, most of the students are depending on the orbits because they are free. So generally they are using the orbits to, go to every day to their home locations to the Tempe campus. Generally, they are using the number bus for, off campus like grocery or, they are going out. But generally they depend on the orbits which are free.
I know, that's not a population.
Yeah.
I didn't have her. Neither of my son.
Yeah. I don't have any answer, but yeah, I will look into that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure.
That's really quickly. So at the beginning, you acknowledged the high price of parking, like $800 passes. Do you know if ASU has continuously increased the number of parking spaces for students over the years?
Yeah, they are increasing, but it is, generally students are using the car, but just because of that prices, they are not using the parking, but they are trying. But I will get back to you. I have to figure it out exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know some schools that have basically like a pass that you don't really pay for, and then it applies to all the transit. Whereas like I feel like in some cases the orbit routes are competing with the transit right next to it. So why are we spending money?
Yeah, that's a good questions. But my research project it more focus about asking their issue and challenges. But yeah, definitely, after me is anyone intern over here, I will tell them, to do that study and give you the best result. Yeah. But I'm so sorry, I did not consider that past thing in my project. I'm so sorry. Yeah, sure.
Proposing two modifications to the existing routes, or are they two additional bus routes?
So the existing route would be there, but it's, it will run after like every 30 minutes, but the short trip will be running at every 10 minutes. It's just because it's like a student population to the ASU campus. So yeah, the existing route should be there, but this is like a new route, which is known as the ASU Express route, especially for the students. Yeah. Yeah.
Stay to the bus route and you see them out there and then the bus is coming and then you don't see people. So you're like, what is it?
Yeah, we try to do some digitization that I need to talk with the ad and make me remember I have to talk with IT regarding that. Yeah, but some digital, maybe app modifications or something like we can do that, that literally give you the real-time update to you. Yeah.
The questions that you asked were like really good, comprehensive, and they were like covering most of them. Did you see any or hear any concerns of students adopting micromobility options like e-scooters or bikes because they're unable to get on the buses? Did you hear any of those concerns?
Actually, yes, lots of, because they are not, literally they told that, we were using just because of this, we just bought the scooter and we are doing this thing. Yeah, so lots of things. That's why this project is, and we are going to sort it out soon. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Our next project is Jacob working with arches.
Hey. Okay. Just make sure I got a handle on this. Oh, down is forward, up is backwards. Okay, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. This is gonna be a presentation with a lot of like really technical language and terms. So if I speed through it, I'm really sorry, but I would love to answer questions afterwards. My name is Jacob, and today my presentation was with the Arizona Research Center for Housing Equity and Sustainability, also known as ARCHES, and it's called Collective Ownership of Manufactured Housing Communities, one answer to Arizona's Hispanic homeownership gap. First, I would like to start with some acknowledgements. My wonderful committee, they were super helpful throughout this process. My client, Dr. Allison Cook-Davis, she's really great. And then also Katina Norwood, my HUD subject matter expert, was also a pleasure to have conversations with. So just a little bit of introduction to this project. Although Hispanic homeownership in Arizona is increasing, it still remains significantly below white homeownership. And that's kind of what this gap is, what this graph is showing. Right now, Hispanic homeownership is at 59%, but there's still about a 15% gap. And so this capstone project supports ARCHES Project 1A.1, closing the homeownership gap, national best practices that support Hispanic homeownership. So just a little bit of some existing conditions. So there, as you can see by this graph, the number of households in the state is increasing way faster than the number of units. That's a housing supply limitation. And then there's also other financial barriers specific to the Hispanic community, such as I-10 loans, which is a form of loans that people who don't have traditional social security numbers can get to finance home purchasing. Those tend to be majority Hispanic homeowners, and they have higher interest rates and things of that nature that make them more expensive. There's also the issue of banking deserts, which a lot of marginalized communities fall into a banking desert where they don't have access to a lot of traditional financial institution infrastructure. We also have manufactured housing. So to get into this a little bit, manufactured housing communities are also locally known as mobile home parks. And so they're a type of housing that's outside of single family homes and multifamily housing complexes. Typically, we see them more informally arranged. Cities can have zoning and stuff for them, but oftentimes they're more informal settlements. And you can have an interesting sort of tenure where you own your actual home, but not the land that it occupies. And that's the case for a number of manufactured housing residents. And that can cause issues if the landlord decides to increase your lot rent significantly and you're not able to pay it as much. So this specific the specific thing I looked at, sorry, my mind left me there. The specific sort of intervention that I'm looking at are resident-owned communities, which is an ownership model proposed by Rock USA, which is a national nonprofit. So a resident-owned community specifically is when the community members itself form a co-op and then purchase the land that their park is on. Therefore, they are able to maintain affordability of their land as they're the ones that vote on lot rent increases, infrastructure improvements, things of that nature. So they're kind of in control of that. This graph is showing when you look at a Rock, which is resident-owned community, I'm going to be saying Rock for the rest of the presentation, versus a commercially owned manufactured housing community, you see that lot rents over the long term remain much, much lower just because the residents themselves are in control of those lot rent increases. And so, as I mentioned, Rock USA is a national organization that's assisting communities with collective ownership of their communities. And yeah, that sort of led me to my research question. Currently, there are no resident-owned communities in Arizona. And so that's kind of what the motivation behind this project was, to look at how can we actually implement ROCs in the state. So my research questions were, how have resident-owned communities been enacted in communities outside of Arizona? What barriers and opportunities exist to establishing ROCs? And then, does enacting a ROC help community members sustain homeownership? And so I conducted interviews as my primary sort of method for this project. I talked to 5 stakeholders outside of the state of Arizona. So 2 ROC technical assistants, so nonprofit activists in the manufactured housing space, and then 1 academic researcher on manufactured housing. And then I talked to 3 internal stakeholders. So 1 official from City of Phoenix Housing Department, an Arizona elected official, and then a local housing advocate. And then to sort of supplement some of that manufactured housing community resident perspective, I also watched/listened to and coded some other media outlets. So we have A Decent Home, which is a really great documentary about manufactured housing. And then I also listened and coded a couple of episodes of Shelter Force podcast, specifically dealing with resident-owned communities and manufactured housing. To get into my findings a little bit, which is what I really want to speak to, because I thought it was super interesting. So I kind of broke these down by research question just to make it a little bit easier to tackle. But so when it comes to how have resident-owned communities been enacted in communities outside of Arizona, one of the really big things that I heard in my interviews was that the reactive nature of establishing ROCs can actually be really challenging. So when manufactured housing communities go up for sale, usually there's a specific window of time that communities have where they're notified that their park is closing or it's going to be sold to another landlord. And that's really short. Sometimes it's as short as like 90 days. And even the states with more safeguards for manufactured housing communities, it can be only like 180 days. So it's really not that much time. And oftentimes nonprofits like ROC, when they're trying to work with communities to help them purchase their land, they only learn about these potential communities through public postings of closure notices or sale notices. So it makes it really hard to organize an entire community in such a short period of time. There's also some characteristics of Hispanic communities that can potentially make the ROC model more challenging. So for example, the ROC model is really time intensive in that you're asking the community members themselves to be the ones who sort of preside over the community, make the financial decisions, make the infrastructure improvements. They're the ones that have to take care of everything. So in Hispanic communities where maybe they have more kids that they need to watch, or they're having to work multiple jobs, and this is sort of the experiences that my interviewees expressed, it can be challenging to find enough people who have the time available to run the co-op and make sure that financial obligations and things of that nature are being taken care of. Some other findings. So building trust in Hispanic communities can potentially take more time than white communities. The ROC model as it currently exists has been really successful in retiree communities in the New England region of the country, just because there's a lot of people there with a lot of time, and they're all sort of like already externally motivated. But then when you're trying to come into a community that is majority Hispanic, that it can be really difficult. And that kind of speaks to the time limitations when you're actually looking at just organizing a ROC in general. Like, it can be even more challenging when you have to work harder to build trust with these communities. There's also legislative protections for manufactured housing communities. that dictate what is capable. So some of the people that I spoke to in Colorado were really adamant about the fact that the legislation there and the extension of the time that they had to organize before park closures or park sales was really sort of enabling for them to establish ROCs in the state. In other states where there isn't that many protections for manufactured housing communities like Arizona, it's really difficult to organize just because the legislative processes aren't there to facilitate that organization. For my second research question, just some things that I found were, again, legislative barriers and opportunities. So right of first refusal is a concept where when someone is selling their manufactured housing park, for example, the community has the first chance to put in an offer for the land. And that's really important in states that have right of first refusal. It's easier to organize a ROCs because those communities have like a protected window of time where they're able to put in an offer versus in other states, when you're directly competing with third-party offers right out the gate, it can make it a lot more challenging. We also, in speaking with the City of Phoenix individual, they're already having conversations with ROC USA to try and get some momentum going in the city, which is really awesome. It just hasn't translated into actual action so far. So we would like to see that in the future. And then I'm gonna move to my third research question. So does enacting a ROC help community members sustain home ownership? The answer was a resounding yes. Everyone that I spoke to could speak to how not only was there increased affordability in these communities with lot rents not increasing all the time, but also there was a ton of mental health benefits where park residents didn't have to worry about their land being sold or their park closing for redevelopment or anything. So there was a lot of mental health benefits. And also enacting ROCs can even increase resilience of communities, which I can totally get into in questions. But then we had some recommendations. I organized recommendations by stakeholders, primarily, lawmakers pass legislation that makes it easier for ROCs, nonprofit leaders to engage in some more proactive organizing efforts. And also, I think it's really important to just create a map/catalog of manufactured housing parks in the state, because that doesn't currently exist, and that would help provide sort of more ideas about where these communities are that we can organize. Any questions? Yes.
I have a two-parter. Did you find that like Arizona tenant protection, tenant landlord like laws might act as a barrier to these? And also in your interviews, did like concerns around undocumented communities come out at all, like as far as like fear of collective organizing?
Yes, to answer your second part first, that was something that the interviewees really spoke about, how it can be really challenging in majority Hispanic communities, particularly where maybe more undocumented folks live, to even get them to show up to organizing meetings. And because the establishment of the co-op really needs the entire community's input and participation, that can make it really, really challenging in those communities where people are living in fear for a variety of reasons to establish a ROC. So yes, that totally is a contributor. And then Arizona landlord tenant protections. I mostly only looked at the manufactured housing version of that instead of like all tenants, but the barriers are definitely there. In Arizona specifically, you only have to give 180 days for a park closure or park sale, which is a lot less than other states that I looked at, like Washington or Colorado, where you're often required to give a year or even more of a notice. So it's really challenging, and Arizona has, in the past couple of years, had experiences where manufactured housing parks have closed quite quickly and residents haven't been able to organize, which has been really unfortunate. So I do definitely think that's a barrier.
We have a question back. I was curious, in your peer research, Colorado or otherwise, did you find that with, they give you any kind of sense of what was the most challenging to kind of execute? Was it the ability or lack thereof of the tenants to organize and or coming up with the capital to make the purchase, and how thoughts on how they would develop the capital actually acquire going at this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So the question, sorry, I didn't repeat the first question. The question was, what's most challenging about establishing a ROC, the capital acquisition versus the organizing? And I think the people that I spoke to, and then also reflected in the media that I also kind of analyzed the documentary and the podcast, I think while organizing is a key challenge and there's a lot of barriers to getting people in the community to come to the table and sort of hash out who's going to do the work, I do think that the capital is a really important part that is still really difficult for communities, particularly when we're looking at things like private equity landlords who have increasingly begun to purchase manufactured housing parks as part of their portfolio. They're able to raise huge amounts of capital to compete with the communities themselves. And oftentimes the community, even if they're raising what might be considered a fair market asking price for the community, these other landlords or these other people can come up with even more money, and the original seller will maybe go with them instead because they can get more money. So I think the capital acquisition is definitely a critical piece that still needs to be looked at.
Is established. Do communities like this maintain that property, you know, and organize and have the capacity and the bandwidth to do that? And does ROC as an entity help with that long-term?
Yeah, certainly. So, okay, up is back. So to speak a little bit to that, so after ROC does have a network of technical assistants, and those, I was fortunate enough to speak with a couple of them, but those technical assistants provide support for at least 10 years after the transition to ROC. The community can extend beyond that if they choose to, but those technical advisors really serve to consult with the board of the co-op and make sure that they're paying back interest on their loans on time, make sure that their residents are all happy. Oftentimes, I didn't get to touch on this, but in terms of affordability, usually there is an initial jump in lot rent prices just for the community to be able to start paying back their loans. So the ROC the ROC board is responsible for trying to see, okay, what's an appropriate level to raise it? How do we continue to keep our community affordable while at the same time fulfill our debts that we have to fulfill now? And so that's kind of what the main, what it looks like after the transition. But then also and I didn't touch on this third point as much either, but after it's transitioned to a ROC, oftentimes these communities are able to develop their infrastructure more freely than they were beforehand. So there was one community in particular I looked at in, gotta wrap this up. There was one community in particular I looked at who mitigated the impacts of Hurricane Harvey because they were actually able to develop their stormwater infrastructure without needing landlord approval. They could just do it themselves. So there are a lot of positive outcomes from transitioning to ROC. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Jacob. Our next presentation is Sean with the City of Tempe.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. All right. My name is Sean Dolan. I'm representing the City of Tempe here today. Thanks for coming out. So today, back down. Great. We have a housing and a parking analysis. So we're just going to combine these elements. We're going to talk about both of them and really their relevancy. So the area, over here. The area that we're talking about, we are about right here. So half mile of where we are within this sort of half crescent shape, that is where we are studying. So these yellow shapes, these are single family zones. We're going to explore them. This historic area that we're talking about, this has a lot of historic relevance. We're going to get into those, a lot of irrigated lots. And then finally, we just have a lot of neighborhoods that surround us here. So those brown figures, a lot of neighborhoods, not a lot of parks in those green areas. So to discuss some housing infill that we're expecting to see in this area, right now, we're seeing up to 3 units that can be built within these single family lots. And so they're allowed to spread across the lot. So that's sort of into the back where they previously were not able to be. And they don't require additional parking. And so that's really going to limit that existing parking that does exist on those lots. And so no design compatibility will be required. And so it doesn't have to be consistent with local architecture. And then where we see growth occurring in 2026, we see the possibility for another unit to be added to those single family lots, and then the possibility for it to be stacked. So growing upwards where this might be growing across the lot. We see one required parking space per unit. And so no changes to the setback. So on those existing lots in that area. And then we also we do see those design requirements allowing consistency with local architecture. And then just to give you an example, this is like the quintessential single family home. We see like that middle housing example here, and then some of those perhaps ADUs. This is just for representative purposes. So we're showing parcels with current ownership as opposed to lots. And this just gives you an example of local architecture here in Maple Ash and those really unique lots that hold water and flood irrigated lots. We have just why we're here. So we're connecting single family lots and seeing where that growth is occurring and really connecting, is there parking infrastructure? How do we accommodate low income students in the area, such as myself? And so this just gives you an idea of what this area looks like with those unique canals and what those streets look like. So lots of maps to look at here. Just to mention here, the HOAs in the area, there's not a lot of them. So the blue HOAs that we do see, they may be able to restrict development, whereas these neighborhood associations that you see in orange over here, they're going to allow a lot more development to occur. So we see on the current zoning map, there is allowed development, a lot more density to occur within this surrounding neighborhood. This is currently where ASU resides in this area that we currently are. And then we also do see the possibility for greater housing development to go northwards and to the right, whereas there's just lesser housing development that may occur in lesser density. In the future, we're looking to see that sort of density occur all the way across this upper half area. And then we also see off to the left, single family remain, though this was made prior to the infill requirements that we're seeing. So these may not be consistent, and thus that is why we're here to plan accordingly. So we see relative to all of that infrastructure, just a greater amount of transportation access with this red light rail to nearby cities and really surrounding just a lot less as it pertains to those neighborhoods off to the left in those single family zones. So just to give you an example here of a way that the city of Phoenix has been able to transition in their historic Roosevelt neighborhood with accommodating greater housing density. They have added pedestrian lanes to add just a little bit more access for nearby students who may be living within downtown ASU campus. We have a residential parking program, I must mention. And so in these neighborhoods, we have exclusive access to parking on the street. And so that really limits nearby parking within this area. So only guests and only residents within those neighborhoods may park. They're given 2 at minimum passes. They might be given more if they have large families, and then if they don't have a driveway, for example. And then we also see for city economics, we have the middle housing bill only applicable to this area, exclusive development rights. So increase in demand may occur. Last, parking never ultimately free. Important to note. So we're going to get into the results here. I have single family homes to discuss here. And so these are single family lots we found, greater density occurring closer to ASU within these single family lots, up to 3. And then we see over here all of the LLC parcels that have been identified as single family lots. Again, we see greater density occurring within those. And then as far as the housing construction year goes, we see just older homes existing in this. within this older neighborhood relative to ASU and these single family homes. And then just a lot newer development occurring to the north. And as far as the multifamily mixed goes, we have these really large lots occurring northward, and of course they are the newer ones. So we also do see a lot more people in them, so up to 200. And then we also do see some infill occurring within these neighborhoods, but there's not a lot of between 1 and 4 as it applies to the middle housing or ADU. So the economics doesn't quite show us that that is a prominent feature as of right now. For off-street parking in the area, we collected garage, carport, we collected driveway. And so we're just seeing not a lot of available parking within these single family home areas. And then we do see a lot more parking being offered in the north area. And then just to note, the bedrooms also coordinate, where we see just a lot more bedroom counts within those sort of multifamily, single family areas, up to 1,000, where as it pertains to the north mixed and multifamily. And then so where we collected, and I know this is a little bit wonky, but where we collected all of the single family parking spaces as it pertains to the study area and the expected amount of cars that people will own, we found that just over 85% of utilization is to be expected. So just a lack of additional parking space offered to ADUs or middle housing in the area. And perhaps greater need for on-street parking. So allow me to introduce this beautiful map. We've got the blue over here representing restricted parking, and a lot of that has big streets, fast cars on it. And so where we are currently, we just see a lot of restricted parking surrounding ASU. And then where we do see available parking nearby, we have meters, and that is nearly near downtown, near us here, off East Apache. And then we also see a lot of the permitted parking, as I mentioned, so restricted to only guests and only residents within this area. And then just off to the sides, we have open parking, basically just outside of ASU. So we just took a look at those certain permitted areas, and we had some concern seeing as all the density in this Maple Ash area may allow less parking to be accessed for nearby residents. So area 2 is where we captured all of the units that apply to the permit program where they may park on the street. And we captured all of the spaces that might be able to be utilized on the street. And so in calculating that, at minimum, we see 184% utilization. And so we're just not seeing a lot of space here for additional growth or existing growth. So I've got 1 minute left. ADUs here, they're just clustered all in the back rear of the lot. Not a lot of on-street parking space for them. And so that's just a really big concern for us. So ultimately, we just have to design really a means for these students to access the places that they need to be. And let me just go back here. If they're going to have to park in these areas and they don't have a means of getting to streets, they're going to have to cross these areas in order to reach available parking spaces. And so my idea that I might propose here is to introduce a type of metered parking where at least people might be able to be prepared accordingly. So that basically comes down to it. We really just need to maintain public trust by ensuring that there's consistency between parking and the expected housing that is in downtown Tempe. Thank you. Any questions? The minimums are going down. So in those new developments that we saw, the mixed use developments up north of the map, there's lower standards. So they're nearly half, of what we're expecting for those existing single family homes in some cases. And so as it pertains historically, a lot less is being built as a whole. But of course, as we saw, there's a lot of capacity that does exist for those really large developments. As it pertains to e-bikes in the area, I'm not entirely sure I can speak to that. My goal here with this project is to just slow down nearby streets in general. And so, I mean, if an e-bike is going, around 10 miles per hour, or, the walkable speed of perhaps like a golf cart, and it's safe for everyone involved, that's, what I'm here to accomplish. You're welcome. Yes.
I just saw a presentation by somebody from ASU at the Arizona Bike Conference, and he said that e-scooters have surpassed the number of bikes that students are purchasing. And so I thought that was really interesting from like a health component too. And he made it sound like e-scooters are just cheaper. And I also think that if students are living in apartments, it's a lot easier. Although what they're trying to do now is get all the scooters outside because of the fire concerns. So they're creating something new for students. But so, I mean, there with like Whole Foods going in nearby and Trader Joe's, I mean, is there a need if a lot of students, like, I wonder what percent of the population of students don't have.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a great point, and further research might be able to understand where, where parking structures may play into this. As far as like what you were mentioning, I totally agree that kids and students, whoever is, utilizing the streets should have access to it. And right now, where we're designating street space to those who own cars primarily, there's a trade-off there, and neighborhoods belong to everyone. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Eddie, our next presentation is Samantha, presenting with the city of Scottsdale.
I am pleased to let you know that I am the last presentation today. How do I work this? Up, down, down. Okay, so I want to press up. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Evening? We're kind of in a hazy period. It's finals week when the students don't know how to address what time of day it is for a 2-week period. Thank you for hanging in there to hear my presentation after all the wonderful work that other students have done this semester with the knowledge and experience that we've earned here at ASU. My name is Sam Badger. I will be graduating next week with a dual master's in urban and environmental planning as well as public policy. I am also a Marvin Andrews Urban Management Fellow, where I spent 1 year as a local government consultant and researcher and a 2nd year in Scottsdale City Manager's Office as an MA Fellow. It was the support of former Assistant City Manager Brent Stockwell that this project came to be, and I am so thankful for him and the planning staff members, Brad Carr and Adam Yaron, for allowing me to help inspire middle housing developers in Scottsdale. So before we begin the presentation, I want to let you know that I printed out a hard copy of it for your viewing. My apologies that it's in black and white. That's the only 2 colors my home printer offers. But the presentation will feature full color pages so you have a complete view of the project. So give me just a second and you guys can pass this around. Topics of interest. So House Bill 2721 was signed into law in May of 2024 and goes into effect January 2026. The legislation requires communities of 75,000 or larger to allow middle housing development in single-family residential zones. The law also prohibits various forms of regulation on these structures by local government entities. Property owners have the authority to choose parking locations and number of bays. Conditions for exemption include unincorporated areas, those not serviced by municipal water and sewer services, among other conditions. If communities choose not to adopt regulations, by the time the law goes into effect, it grants unrestricted authorization for residents to build middle housing. While Scottsdale staff and elected officials develop language for local regulations, this project was developed to provide the public with best practices and guidelines for middle housing developments. As previously mentioned, Arizona communities have until the first of the year to adopt middle housing regulations or forfeit the authority to regulate these developments. At the moment, mayor and council have not yet agendized a vote for Scottsdale's middle housing ordinance. Until now, residents and developers lacked resources to assist them with blending middle housing structures with Scottsdale's residential neighborhoods that traditionally have single-family dwellings. So there were many plans, many a night, many an hour I spent looking through middle housing guidebooks. Surprisingly, there weren't nearly as many as I thought there were, but we ended up with these four. A design firm, a nonprofit organization, and a municipal and state government resource were reviewed for elements Scottsdale's planning staff may find helpful or appropriate for their neighborhoods. Major elements included building typologies, housing scale, sample floor plans, parcel diagrams, parking diagrams, character areas, compatible parcel examples, and material suggestions. The initial meeting brought the staff and faculty committee together for introductions, summarized the project purpose and scope, provided staff the opportunity to select major elements of Scottsdale's publication, confirm any additional submittals for ASU, establish a communication plan, and finalize the project timeline. Both planning and city manager's office staff participated in the meeting. There were 3 rounds of feedback provided by city staff, which refined the material to suit Scottsdale's needs. Staff were provided 2 weeks for review each round, offering thoughtful, detailed suggestions. One of the major elements discussed in the project briefing, sections 2 through 5 were selected by the staff for the Scottsdale Guidebook. The first section, Introduction, contextualizes middle housing in the city of Scottsdale and surveys best practices found among middle housing resources and literature. Residential architectural styles were presented and summarized to provide inspiration for new housing projects. Finally, the introduction section describes Scottsdale's planning process so prospective developers understand the materials required and the public services available to help receive project approvals. Building typology section provides details and examples of the different categories of middle housing that HB 2721, permits. I think I just found out I have dyslexia. Examples from Scottsdale were prioritized, which they did have some of middle housing examples, but representing typologies of the major architectural styles was also important for inspiring prospective developers to design middle housing in a way that, this is going to sound familiar, blends into single-family homes in the neighborhoods. Standard lot sizes between single-family residential zones, a comparison of housing density between single-family neighborhoods and those with middle housing, and the photo credits, which is not shown in this presentation, but are in the physical copy, were also provided in this section. The housing scale section illustrates the proportionality of middle housing and design elements which assist these structures blending in with traditional housing designs. This section focuses on best practices to designing middle housing proportionally, similar to a single-family housing, and more clearly identifies the types of residential structures that are typically labeled as middle housing and how it compares to single-family and large-scale multifamily buildings. Next, parking diagram section reviews the requirements applicable to middle housing developers in Scottsdale. And the section also presents ideas to guide parking locations and design on middle housing projects by building typology. So you can see that the bottom left and the top right are both duplexes, but the bottom left is an example of a side-by-side duplex, and the top right is an example of a stacked duplex. As the illustrations show, most parking is designed with either a side driveway that tucks parking bays behind the residence or provides alley access to a covered parking structure also located behind the structure. Last, material suggestions provide options that are found to be durable and sustainable. The material suggestions section not only provide resilient options for housing finishes, they also reinforce architectural elements that are traditionally used in single-family dwelling designs and avoid commercialized monolithic structures that are not visually compatible with traditional neighborhoods. I appreciate you taking the time to let me present my capstone project for the planning program. I have thoroughly enjoyed working on this publication and hope that it becomes an asset to Scottsdale residents who hope to incorporate middle housing into the urban fabric of the West's most western town. Questions? Yes.
Maybe start all of land development and bring it down as you get closer to some. So like what impact does that have on feasibility of getting projects?
So are you talking about the levels and the massing of the structure themselves? Sure. Yes. So Opticos Design is one of the major consultants on middle housing in the country. They've helped a lot of communities integrate middle housing policy and design guidelines into their documents. They have two different types of scale. They have a block scale, and then they have a house scale. So there's two different scales of building massing. The block scale is usually what you would refer to as mid-rise or high-rise, rectilinear international style apartments. And then the house scale is like your traditional single-family neighborhoods. And so the purpose of middle housing, especially in relation to HB 2721, which specifically allows duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, ADUs, but that was a separate piece of legislation. Its intention is to have single or two-story at maximum, which is also in the guidebook. It outlines that out, that it shouldn't be taller than 2 stories. And that the massing and proportionality of these structures should be such that it looks residential. These materials, these finishes, these designs, they should all work together in a way on these single-family lots with what Scottsdale's minimum lot requirement for each residential zoning area allows, so that they do blend in. And Scottsdale already has some examples of these. I think Happy Place, there's something like that, a neighborhood that has a lot of duplexes and triplexes. If you get back with me after the presentation, I can give you exactly what it's called. But it's a really cool way of how they've even integrated fourplexes to kind of blend in with these single family structures. Yeah.
Have you found that like having this book of images of what these houses would actually look like have helped like ease the mind of some of the people in whether it's Scottsdale planning or Scottsdale residents, or do you think there's still a level of, I guess, resentment towards what residents might live in these places?
We have a highly engaged community in Scottsdale. And they are very passionate about their neighborhoods. I'm sure there will be some resistance. There was growing pains whenever short-term rentals came into Scottsdale neighborhoods, because that was an odd, blend of commercialization and residential uses. And now we're going to have some growing pains with middle housing development. But this guidebook is intended to offer the popular architectural styles and offer suggestions to those who are interested to design it in a way that can get approved by planning, that actually is middle housing, and that causes the least visual disruption to those neighborhoods. So that way it blends in altogether. Deirdre?
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how, what you know about how Scottsdale plans to use this playbook? Like when a project is proposed, like where would this come into the process? And I don't know, would this be more inspirational or advisory, or would there be things, standards that projects would be held up to?
So it's going to be a combination. I was told that this document will help them form the language of the ordinance that they will propose to council. And so it helps give them some resources as to what to ask for or what to require as a municipality within the bounds of the state legislation. It will also be a public-facing document, both inspirational and advisory, because these are what they are hoping for. But like in the legislation mentioned earlier, there are very specific ways municipalities are allowed to regulate it. So we have to propose a lot of these guidebooks as suggestions and not requirements, especially when it comes to parking. I hope that was helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of spin off related to that. Guidelines have a lot of sole purpose, but in the House bill itself, or whether Scottsdale interested in the mechanics, like does someone have to go get the zone change, the use permit, or can they by right just pull a building permit that zoning district allows that?
Yeah. So the law requires municipalities of population 75,000 and over, minus the exceptions mentioned earlier, to allow middle housing in all zoning that is residential, single-family use. So there won't be any local regulations saying, no, you can't be in this district. It's a single-family district. They just kind of have free reign for an extent, depending on what the municipality's elected officials pass as far as municipal ordinances. And of course, if they don't pass any by January 1st, then it's a free-for-all. So, yeah. Isn't it though? Yeah.
Look at the impacts to neighborhoods that don't have HOA. HOA has the ability to control their architectural design versus the neighborhoods in terms of a social equity for regular neighborhoods, older neighborhoods, maybe that face development impacts of this, and the character change that could result if developers choose not to follow the guide.
Yeah. So that particularly was outside the scope of my project, but I suspect that all of these proposals, all these design proposals are going to go through the same rigorous process of approval and application that any other project will go to. And naturally, people can still use public forum to voice their thoughts about it if something is passed and they don't necessarily agree with it. So it will be interesting to see how this develops, no pun intended. Of an HOA, yeah. Yeah.
There's no public.
Yeah.
So there is no public.
Scottsdale Planning, if you're on the call, would you like to answer the question?
It's not them, it's state.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Alrighty, so thank you so much, everyone, for sitting through all of our presentations. I know it was a lot of great information. Our students were hard at work all semester long, so thank you so much. Before you all head out, we do have quite a few people that we would like to thank. Our partnership with the ASU Sustainable Cities Network, Project Cities, the City of Tolleson, Kingman, City of Phoenix, the University City Exchange, and Reimagined for being our planning workshop clients this year. So let's give a big round of applause for all of our parents. In the applied project space, we would like to thank the cities of Tempe, Scottsdale, Valley Metro, and Arches as well. Big round of applause for our applied project experience. We have a lot of great engagement with our planning advisory board, who works in an advisory capacity to the program on strengthening and advancing it forward. And so big thank you to all of our program advisory board members. Let's give them all a big round of applause. And last but certainly not least, big thank you to all of the ASU faculty who partnered with our students, mentoring them and setting them up for great academic and professional success as they graduate and move on beyond. So let's give a big round of applause for them. We would also like to thank our program sponsors for this academic year, including the American Planning Association Arizona chapter, Espiritu Loci, Arches again, and the Sustainable Cities Network. So thank you all so much for partnering. And last but certainly not least, big congratulations to all of our students who are graduating this year. You have so much to be proud of, and we are so incredibly proud of you and all of the excellent work you have done. Best wishes as you move on, and go Devils.